Welcome to the Deconstructionist Deep Dive.
The show that doesn't just accept the story.
We break it
We examine the pieces.
and expose the machinery inside. Let's dive in. Okay, so our starting point today. It's definitely challenging. I mean, it's really designed to shake things up, specifically around this massive cultural movement we've seen explode over the last, 20 years?
Absolutely. We're talking about the modern wellness and the healing industry. And we're asking a question that, well, let's be honest, it might make a lot of people uncomfortable.
It's this. What if everything about the modern therapy, trauma, and self-healing movement isn't just wrong, but is designed to be wrong?
And that right there, that's the mission for this deep dive. We're basically taking a scalpel, a really sharp one, drawing from philosophy, sociology, critical theory.
Yeah, the heavy hitters.
Right, and we're applying it to this dominant story, the narrative around modern wellness, the goal to expose the underlying structure.
The architecture behind it all.
Exactly. The rhetorical tricks, the levers they pull, and importantly, the power structures that define your suffering and then turn around and sell you the cure.
And sell it as this kind of proprietary lifelong service.
That's the core of it. We're looking at sources, really critical sources that don't just see this as, helpful advice.
Not just good intentions gone slightly wrong.
No, not at all. They see it as a highly structured, almost self-perpetuating system of thought. One that might be designed, maybe not even consciously by everyone involved, but designed nonetheless for compliance.
And for dependency, lifelong dependency. Our aim here is to give you, the listener, the tools, the intellectual toolkit to recognize this system when you see it, piece by conceptual piece.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's unpack this architecture. If you're building any kind of system that needs, infinite customers.
Whether it's politics or religion or, in this case, therapy.
Right, you need these foundational axioms, these basic premises that you present as just, obvious truths. They define the problem before you even offer the solution.
Crucial stuff.
And our sources, they pinpoint 4 key axioms that really drive this modern therapeutic conversation. They construct the very problem of being human in a specific way.
And the first axiom, honestly, it sets the whole stage. It's probably the single most successful bit of rhetorical engineering in modern psychology. It's the primacy of universal trauma.
Universal, that's the key word there, isn't it?
Absolutely. This axiom says that trauma, and this is critical, regardless of how severe it seems, is the universal root cause.
The root cause of everything, like all unhappiness, neuroses, not achieving enough, any emotional difficulty.
Pretty much. You might think trauma means, the big stuff, catastrophe, abuse, major loss, the big T trauma.
That's what comes to mind first.
But the system, it's much cleverer than that. It's more subtle.
Also,
The real power lies in the small t trauma category. We're talking subtle shaming, maybe some neglect, minor moments of feeling unseen.
like a dismissive look from a parent decades ago. That counts.
According to this model, yes. By stretching the definition of trauma to include the entire spectrum of human suffering, disappointment, even just awkwardness, the system guarantees itself 100% market saturation.
Wow. So everyone fits the bill. Everyone has trauma.
Everyone fits. And what's the result of this universally defined trauma? The system defines it very narrowly. It's basically an inability to be present.
An inability to be present. So if I'm anxious about the future or distracted by my phone or just, unhappy about rent going up.
Bingo. The system hands you a ready-made explanation. It's not the situation, it's not your rational response. By definition, it's unresolved, subtle trauma bubbling up, stopping you from accessing the now.
Okay, so right there, that's the first major critique point, isn't it?
Immediately. This framing takes the entire human condition, all its messiness, its limitations, its frustrations, minor down days, existential worries.
More no human stuff.
Normal human stuff. And it converts every single bit of it into a pathology, a sickness, one that needs specialized, expert-led treatment.
So your anger isn't justified anger at injustice. It's just
your trauma talking. That's the first crucial step in colonizing your inner world, defining everything as sickness.
Okay, so if the problem is universal, the system then needs to define how it works inside us, right? Which brings us to axiom number 2, the fragmented self. This is where models like IFS, internal family systems, come in.
Yeah, the idea that the self isn't whole, it's shattered, broken into pieces.
Instead of seeing the psyche as like a unified field or just you.
Right. The system argues it's made up of distinct, almost independent parts. And they're not just metaphors, not just ideas. They're treated like actual characters inside you.
Internal agents. with their own goals and beliefs.
Exactly. And this gives you immediate language for your internal chaos, which feels validating, you know? That's my anxious part acting up.
I see. And there's always a key division they talk about, isn't there?
Always. It's the protector self versus the exiled self.
Okay, break that down. Protectors are.
Protectors are your defense mechanisms, basically. Your control issues, maybe addictions, perfectionism, even procrastination. They're the parts you see, the loud ones, sometimes the destructive ones.
Gotcha. And the exiled self.
The protectors, the story goes, they only exist to manage the exiles. The exiled self is supposedly the wounded young part. It holds the core pain, the shame, the terror, the original hurt from way back when.
So it creates this internal hostage situation.
Pretty much. The protectors are doing a bad job, maybe, but they think they're keeping the lid on the deeper pain of the exile and the healing task. It becomes this complex internal diplomacy.
Which conveniently requires an outside mediator.
Kingo, the therapist. You need help negotiating between these warring factions inside you.
It's like an internal bureaucratic nightmare where suffering is just a disagreement between these fictional agents.
Right, but if you're going to tell people they're universally traumatized and internally fragmented, you need to offer some hope, right? Some promise of wholeness to make the whole journey seem worthwhile.
And that leads us to Axiom 3, the undamaged core. They call it the self, with a capital S.
Yes, the capital S self. This is positioned as your true essence. It's inherently resourced, compassionate, wise, calm. Basically, the perfect internal parent you never had.
Yeah, it's the promise, the hook.
It's the guaranteed win at the end. And structurally, this works brilliantly because it says, look, underneath all the trauma mess, there's this pristine, valuable core that's always been there. It's the bait.
But there's always a catch, isn't there? A hurdle that makes this promise profitable.
Always. The condition is this capital S self exists, yes, but you can only get to it using specific, often proprietary techniques.
So you can't just, meditate your way there or decide to access it.
Nope. According to the system, you need the special keys, the roadmap, the expert guide to navigate through all those fragmented parts first. The cure is supposedly internal, but the access, that's externalized and monetized.
Controlled access.
And tying this whole package together, the universal sickness, the internal fragmentation, the inaccessible cure is the final piece, Axiom 4, the core wound.
Ah, yes, the core wound. Underneath all the big T, small t trauma, all the parts fighting.
The system asserts that the entire structure, all your suffering, rests on one single unifying belief. A belief designed to guarantee you stay engaged with the process indefinitely.
And that belief is?
Stated simply, I am inadequate and unlovable.
Wow, that's potent.
It's genius engineering in a way, because it resonates deeply, doesn't it? Regardless of your actual life success.
Okay.
Think about it. A super successful CEO can still be told, but deep down you're just running from your core wound of feeling unlovable.
So it applies to everyone, no matter what.
Exactly. The problem is now defined as intrinsic, maybe even eternal, and definitely universally applicable. That ensures infinite patient demand. Doesn't matter how rich or accomplished you are, the system has its hook in everyone. Okay, so they've laid out the diagnosis, right? Universal trauma, fragmented self, this deep core wound of inadequacy. Now we shift from the philosophical problem setting to the practical stuff, the derived conclusions and the actual process they prescribe.
This is the roadmap they give you, the steps you need to take for compliance and for long-term engagement with the system.
Exactly. And the first big derived conclusion really focuses on your physical body. It's all about somatic manifestation and dependency.
Somatic, meaning body-based. So if you're selling these specialized techniques, you need people to believe the problem isn't just in their head, it's physically in them.
Precisely. The body gets framed as, well, almost like a primary site where this unresolved trauma lives. It manifests physically. Think GI issues, chronic inflammation, weird pains, sleep problems.
Things lots of people experience.
Right. But instead of exploring other causes, it gets instantly linked back to trauma. This solidifies the psychosomatic model. Mind affects body, therefore trauma affects body.
And this is a critical move strategically, isn't it?
Absolutely critical, because if trauma is just, psychological, maybe reading a self-help book works.
Right.
Or changing your job or your relationships.
Things you could potentially do on your own.
Right. But if the trauma is physically stored, lodged in your nervous system, tangled in your fascia, messing with your vagus nerve, whatever the latest buzzword is,
then simple thinking or talking isn't enough.
Then introspection alone is framed as insufficient, maybe even naive. This creates what our sources bluntly call the therapeutic necessity.
The idea that you must have their specific tools.
Yes, healing now requires these specialized modalities. We mentioned IFS, but also think EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or somatic experiencing, SE biofeedback even.
These aren't just presented as helpful options, are they?
Not at all. They're positioned as non-negotiable requirements. The only way to unlock the physical prison your trauma has supposedly created, you're deliberately taught to believe that deep healing cannot happen without an expert guiding you through their specific proprietary.
And often very expensive.
And often very expensive framework. Yeah.
Okay, so the body is implicated. What else?
Well, the system also needs to ensure this expertise is required throughout your life, not just for past issues, which leads to derived conclusion number 2, pathologized transitions.
Pathologized transitions, meaning normal life changes get turned into trauma events.
Pretty much. Major life events that traditionally might be seen as challenging, sure, but also moments of growth or rites of passage, becoming a parent, getting married, big career shifts.
Yeah, stressful but potentially rewarding things.
They get automatically reframed. They become triggers for dormant, unresolved trauma from your past, always circling back.
Can you give a specific example?
The most potent one the sources highlight is postpartum depression. Now, obviously, that's a real and serious issue for many women.
Definitely. Complex factors involved.
Right. Hormones, sleep deprivation, massive life change, lack of social support. But the therapeutic narrative often narrows the focus. It gets presented primarily as a severe activation of early childhood trauma.
So it minimizes the immediate real-world factors.
It can, yeah. And the mechanism here ensures that no phase of life is ever just challenging or even just happy. It must always be viewed through the lens of excavation.
Requiring expert supervision, naturally.
Naturally. It makes every potential moment of joy or achievement conditional. You can't fully enjoy it until you've dealt with the underlying pathology first.
Which is a process that, as we'll see, never really ends.
Exactly. And who bears the weight of all this endless, complex excavation? This brings us right to the core sociological function of this whole system, the burden of healing. And it's ruthlessly rooted in hyper-individualism.
Ah, yes. This is where the therapeutic story lines up perfectly with, well, modern neoliberal capitalism, doesn't it?
It's a hand-in-glove fit. The individual you bears the sole responsibility for healing through this process called reparenting the self.
Reparenting the self, meaning you have to fix what your parents supposedly broke all by yourself.
Essentially, yes. And this narrative, by making suffering purely an individual problem, it actually pathologizes the very human need for connection, for mutual healing, for community support in relationships.
How does it do that?
Look at the fine print. Your partner, your family, your friends, they cannot heal your trauma. The best they can do is provide a safer container while you do the work.
So if you lean on your partner for emotional support or co-regulation,
the system slaps a label on that. Danger, that's codependence. Or it's a reenactment of your childhood dynamics. Or you're wrongly looking for a parent in your partner.
wow, so it isolates you.
It atomizes suffering. It absolves community, society, even systemic issues of any real supportive role. It privatizes the cost of emotional well-being and forces the individual to pay experts to fix problems that might have originated in the social structure itself.
Okay, so the burden is entirely on the individual to fix this complex, somatically stored, universal trauma.
Yeah.
They obviously need a process, a method.
And the core of this prescribed long-term process is something our source material calls titration.
Titration. Like in chemistry, adding something slowly.
Exactly, that concept. Healing must be slow, it must be gradual, it must be non-linear, meaning lots of ups and downs.
Okay, but why is slowness a requirement?
This is the crucial linguistic trick. Slow recovery isn't presented as a sign that maybe the method isn't working or that you're resisting. No. It gets valorized. It's framed as deep work, meaningful work, nuanced work.
So if you're stuck working on the same core issues 10 years later...
You're not failing, you're not resistant, you're just doing the work really deeply. See how that works.
Yeah, I do. It's the perfect setup for economic codependency, isn't it?
Absolutely. It manufactures your consent for long-term engagement. If trauma was like a broken leg, the goal would be fast, complete healing. Get the cast off, do the physio, get back to normal.
Right. Finite process.
But by defining trauma as this ever-shifting internal landscape of warring parts and deep wounds, the goal shifts from cure to perpetual maintenance.
Managing the symptoms indefinitely.
Exactly. And while you're engaged in this slow, complex, costly titration process, they equip you with the toolbox.
The toolbox. coping mechanism.
Coping mechanisms, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to constantly cultivate this kit of self-regulating techniques. Breath work, journaling, meditation, tapping, grounding exercises.
Things that can provide temporary relief.
Temporary relief is the key. They're presented not as ways to end the process, but as essential tools for managing crisis moments during the long, ongoing, expert-mediated journey. They are coping tools, not liberation tools.
Keeping you functional enough to keep paying for the process.
Cynical, but arguably, yes. And finally, the system needs visibility. It needs proof that the work is being done. This manifests as the performance of vulnerability.
The idea that speaking the unspeakable is strength, that sharing your pain dissolves shame.
Which on the surface sounds positive, right? But how does it play out? This vulnerability rarely stays purely private. It gets channeled into highly curated spaces.
Like online, social media, blogs.
Online content, definitely. Group retreats, self-help memoirs, workshops. It converts genuine raw pain into a kind of monetized performance of authenticity.
And new benefits.
It reinforces the authority of the expert or the guru figure, the one who listens, validates, maybe shares their own curated story, and, crucially, sets the terms for the correct way to be vulnerable. It turns your internal suffering into external social currency, often benefiting the platform holder.
Okay, so the system is laid out. We have the axioms, the methods, the individual burden. Now, let's bring the skeptic's scalpel to bear. We need to move beyond just describing it and really pinpoint the specific logical flaws, the conceptual weak points that make this whole ideology structurally dependent on itself.
Right. Where does the logic break down? The first major vulnerability our sources identify targets that very first axiom, the monocausal fallacy, the idea that trauma is the universal root cause.
The single cause fallacy. If you claim trauma is the one and only true reason for all human unhappiness, you're making a massive over-attribution error, aren't you?
Huge. Our sources insist we have to look at all the factors this therapeutic narrative conveniently dismisses to keep its monopoly on explanation. What about, say, genetics?
Or straightforward biochemical conditions, like clinical depression that responds well to medication, or bipolar disorder. These aren't necessarily rooted in a narrative of past trauma.
Exactly. Or what about the crushing stress of poverty? Systemic inequality, racism, living in a war zone, a lack of stable community. These are external, material forces.
Real-world conditions that generate profound suffering.
Profound suffering. But by declaring trauma the universal root, the therapeutic discourse cleverly captures all these external structural problems and reframes them.
How so?
It converts them into individual, internal, historical failures. The system effectively tells someone struggling with poverty or marginalization, your instability isn't really about the unjust system you live in. It's actually just your trauma response acting up. You need to regulate your nervous system.
Wow. That's the ultimate mechanism for taking societal pressure and turning it into a personal failing, isn't it? Pathologizing normal responses to abnormal situations.
Precisely. But okay, let's look inside the model itself, the internal structure of this supposed disease. Vulnerability number 2. The reification of metaphor.
Reification, meaning treating something abstract as if it were a real concrete thing.
Exactly. This targets the parts model, the fragmented self idea. It's the fundamental error of taking what is essentially a useful metaphor, like the inner child or a defense mechanism, and turning it into a literal, discrete entity inside you.
Giving it agency, a name, a seat at the internal committee table.
Right. And why is that a fatal flaw, according to the critique?
Well, it seems like it allows for the abdication of personal agency, doesn't it? If your self is fragmented, then moral responsibility gets fragmented too.
How does that play out, practically?
Well, say I procrastinate on something important. Instead of saying, I chose to procrastinate, I can say, oh, that was my protector part. It's afraid of failure, so it hijacked my focus.
Ah, so you've just outsourced your lack of discipline to this fictional internal agent.
Exactly. The whole focus shifts. It's no longer about me taking unified responsibility for my actions I procrastinated. It becomes this exercise in internal diplomacy. I need to understand and negotiate with this part.
It's a critical distinction, isn't it? Real sovereignty, real agency requires a sense of unified self. If the system encourages you to talk to your shame or to your anger, rather than owning your choice to feel or act that way,
then you remain a permanent diplomat within your own mind. Never the actual ruler. Always negotiating.
Always negotiating, never fully sovereign. Okay, moving on to the promise of the system. Vulnerability number 3 attacks axiom 3. The mystical assertion of the undamaged core, that capital S self.
Right, the promise of this inherently pure, compassionate, wise inner resource. The critique here is that this isn't really a psychological finding, is it? It's more like a spiritual assertion.
It's fundamentally unproven. You can't empirically verify its existence. It's inaccessible to measurement.
But the problem isn't just the concept itself, it's the role it plays structurally in the system.
Explain that.
The system mandates this specific, often lengthy, expensive process to reach this promised state, this self. But what happens if after years of therapy, spending loads of money, the person just doesn't feel like they've accessed it?
The system has a built-in out.
Exactly. The consequence is a devastating trap. The system induces feelings of failure and spiritual inadequacy in the individual. The failure is never blamed on the model or the therapist.
It's always internalized. The therapist can just say, well, your protector part must still be too strong, or you haven't fully surrendered to the process, or there's more trauma to uncover.
Right. The goalpost keeps moving. The
Yeah.
promised land remains eternally distant, ensuring you keep seeking, keep trying, keep paying. Perpetual seeking.
Which leads us directly to maybe the clearest, most, let's say, cynical contradiction within the whole architecture. Vulnerability number 4, economic codependency.
This links back to that idea of therapeutic necessity we talked about. If the system insists that only its specialized, proprietary, costly modalities, EMDR, IFS, somatic experiencing, whatever, can lead to true, deep healing.
It immediately creates a required pathway, an expensive pathway managed exclusively by trained, certified experts.
And this pathway directly contradicts the system's own foundational promise, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, the promise of the internal, self-sufficient, capital S self being the actual healer. If I supposedly have this undamaged core inside me that's inherently wise and resourced, why on earth do I need a highly trained professional costing hundreds per hour to mediate the introduction between my parts and myself?
Aha! Good point. It doesn't add up.
It's completely self-cannibalizing logic. The system's architecture prioritizes the market, forces the need to sell proprietary knowledge and expertise over the supposed goal of the subject's genuine self-sufficiency.
So promises internal liberation.
But delivers external, continuous financial submission. That's the core economic contradiction.
Okay, so we've seen the structure, the methods, the flaws, but this whole system, this whole narrative of pathology and dependency, it wouldn't work so well if it felt totally alien, right?
No, for it to really take root to, as you said, colonize the interior world, it has to speak a language that feels, well, maybe cutting edge on the surface, but also deeply familiar underneath.
Exactly. So now we need to connect this therapeutic language to broader streams of thought philosophy, socioeconomic systems to really understand why it's so persuasive. Why does it resonate?
Let's start with those parts. The fragmented self model. Where does that really come from? Our sources argue it feels intuitive, partly because it's basically old wine in new bottles, cultural programming.
How so? Which old bottles?
Well, the IFS parts model, for instance, directly echoes Plato's tripartite soul, doesn't it? Reason, spirit, and appetite. 3 distinct parts managing the self.
Okay, yeah. Ancient Greece.
And it definitely mirrors the Freudian model, too. Ego, superego. Again, distinct internal agents often in conflict.
Right, so this idea of an internal split, an internal committee, it's been a foundational concept in Western thinking about morality and psychology for literally millennia.
So the modern system didn't invent the split. It just
updated the labels, slapped some modern jargon on it, maybe linked it explicitly to trauma, and suddenly this ancient framework feels like a cutting-edge psychological discovery.
making it instantly acceptable, resonant, especially for a Western audience already steeped in these ideas. And then they charged a premium for managing this ancient split.
But the deeper philosophical point here is also about what this system rejects to maintain its dominance.
What does it have to deny?
Well, it fundamentally denies other, equally established ways of understanding the self. Think about the Buddhist concept of a not a no self.
The idea that there isn't a permanent, fixed internal thing to be healed or found. The self is just a process, a convention.
Exactly. Or even look at Western philosophy like David Hume's bundle theory. He argued the self is just a fleeting collection of perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. There's no underlying substance.
And the therapeutic model cannot allow that, can it?
Absolutely not. Because if the self is just a temporary bundle, or non-existent in the Buddhist sense, you can't sell the idea of finding and healing a permanent, fractured, but ultimately fixable object. You certainly can't sell access to a pristine, undamaged capital S self as the final destination.
It has to reify the self. Make it a concrete thing that needs fixing by experts.
It has to. Okay, let's shift to the goal the system sells. Happiness as trauma-free presence, being perfectly present in the now, free from the past.
That sounds good on the surface, like Zen Buddhism or Taoist flow state Wu Wei. Things people genuinely seek.
It borrows the language, definitely. But the sources argue this is a co-option. It's taking authentic contemplative concepts and turning them into a commodity.
And this is where that Marxist critique comes in strong.
Fiercely. The discourse fundamentally commodifies mindfulness and presence. Being present is no longer just a natural state you can cultivate through simple, often free practice. It becomes a service, a product, sold via expensive experts, apps, luxury retreats.
The very act of becoming present gets pathologized and marketed.
Exactly. And crucially, think about what else it does. It pathologizes your inability to be present in a world that is, let's face it, often inherently chaotic, stressful, precarious, and demanding.
Right. So if you're stressed about maybe losing your job or rising costs,
The therapeutic system gently nudges you. Well, your financial stress isn't really about the economy. It's actually a sign of your unresolved trauma preventing you from regulating your nervous system properly. You need these tools, this therapy.
instead of acknowledging it might be a perfectly rational response to an objectively unfair or unstable system.
It performs the ultimate internal shift. It takes the burden of structural failures, poverty, inequality, systemic burnout, and places it squarely onto the individual's nervous system.
Demanding an individual therapeutic solution instead of, say, political action or social change.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, this relentless focus on digging up the past, excavating trauma, how does that stack up against other ways of dealing with suffering?
Yeah, let's compare this therapeutic culture to something like, say, classical Stoicism. Or even Nietzsche, big contrast there.
Huge. Classical Stoicism, think Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, is all about present virtue, making good judgments now, accepting what's beyond your control, which crucially includes the past. It's done. Focus on your actions today.
It demands resilience, acceptance of reality, and action in the present.
Right. The therapeutic model, though, it insists the past isn't fixed, it's malleable. It must be continuously revisited, reprocessed, reframed, using their specialized, often costly techniques before you can supposedly be fully present or virtuous. The past becomes perpetually actionable, perpetually monetizable.
Than the Nietzschean perspective.
Even sharp.
Much sharper. Nietzsche would likely view this obsessive focus on past wounds, on victimhood narratives, on resentment towards past hurts as fundamentally life-denying, weakening.
For him, strength was about affirming life despite suffering, embracing the struggle, the amor fati, love of fate.
Exactly. The therapeutic model, by contrast, often seems to promise the abolition of struggle, a perfectly regulated, trauma-free, safe existence, which, from a Nietzsche viewpoint, might look like a philosophy of weakness masquerading as strength, a desire to escape life's inherent difficulty.
Okay, one last connection, that core method, reparenting the self. You mentioned it aligns with neoliberalism. Our sources argue it's the absolute apex, the perfect expression of neoliberal individualism. What does neoliberalism demand? That you are the CEO of you, Inc.
Solely responsible for your own success or failure, obligated to constantly self-optimize, improve your human capital.
Right. Now apply that logic to emotional well-being. If your parents failed, you provided inadequate safety, neglect, whatever, which you could argue is often a failure of the wider social support system too.
Okay.
It now becomes your individual responsibility, using your private resources, time and money, to go back and fix their supposed errors through proprietary self-help techniques bought on the open market.
It internalizes and privatizes the solution to a potentially social problem.
Completely. And contrast this starkly with traditions like, say, the African philosophy of Ubuntu.
Yeah.
The core idea there is relational. I am because we are.
Healing happens in community through restoring relationships.
Exactly. Healing is communal, restorative, interdependent. The therapeutic model we're dissecting actively rejects that. It often labels reliance on others as codependence or unhealthy merging. It isolates.
So it serves as what Foucault called a technology of the self.
Perfectly put. A system that gets individuals to internalize expert-defined norms, to constantly self-monitor according to those norms, ensuring they remain manageable, compliant subjects within the existing economic and social structure, rather than fostering genuine liberation from it.
All right. We've laid out the architecture, dissected the methods, placed it in its ideological context. Now let's accelerate. Let's get ruthless and detail the specific rhetorical deceptions, the core operational tricks of what we're calling the healing industrial complex.
Yeah, let's connect the dots explicitly. link the strategy directly to the power structure, and ultimately follow the money.
Deception number 1, the monocausal root. That claim again. Trauma is the single defining cause of everything bad. Who holds the power here?
The therapeutic industry itself, the therapists, the training institutes, the professional bodies.
And the mechanism.
Yeah.
By creating this universal flaw, this inherent brokenness based on trauma, you generate literally infinite demand for your services. Our sources draw that stark parallel too.
Christian original sin. Everyone is born flawed, inherently damaged, inheriting this defect that requires salvation mediated by experts, of course.
And the freedom lens, the lie sold as liberation, is that by framing all negative emotion, even normal sadness, justifiable anger, maybe even healthy ambition, as pathology.
You ensure lifelong dependency. You need their methods forever to manage what are often just normal, functional, human reactions to life.
Okay. Deception 2, the undamaged self. That capital S promise, the power source.
This feels more like the domain of the spiritual guru complex. The life coaches, the high-profile influencers, the leaders of expensive transformative retreats.
And the deception. What's the trick?
It's a classic bait and switch. You're sold this phantom, this promised land of inner purity, often compared to mystical concepts like the Gnostic divine spark or the Hindu Atman as something inherently perfect within.
But because the goal is ultimately unprovable, maybe even definitionally inaccessible without their specific mediation.
It guarantees perpetual seeking. And if you perpetually seek, you perpetually pay. It's a feature, not a bug.
Deception 3, the fragmented psyche. The idea that yourself is really a committee of parts, the power source.
Models like IFS therapy specifically, and all the adjacent modalities that build their expertise on managing this internal complexity.
And the deception here is that this model actively disintegrates your sense of unified agency, right?
Exactly. We mentioned the parallel to spiritualist channeling before. The therapeutic subject learns to channel these internal entities, give voice to their parts.
Which allows the individual to essentially avoid full ownership. My protector part did it, not me.
Right. It makes the self manageable only through the system's own language, its own map of internal diplomacy. You become dependent on their framework just to navigate your own consciousness.
Okay. Deception 4, the psychosomatic body. The insistence that trauma is physically stored, locked in the tissues. Power source.
This is prime territory for the broader wellness industry. Think supplements marketed for trauma release, expensive biofeedback gadgets, boutique somatic therapy retreats, specialized body work.
And the deception is framing the body as a kind of traitor.
Yeah, almost like a container of dangerous, unprocessed material. It echoes, disturbingly, the old Victorian diagnosis of hysteria, where women's physical pain was routinely dismissed as purely emotional or moral failure.
And it conveniently diverts attention
from straightforward material or medical causes, or even just basic lifestyle factors. Instead of investigating nutritional deficiencies, sleep issues, or actual physical injuries, the narrative pushes you towards costly, proprietary somatic modalities. You might miss real-world, simpler solutions.
Deception 5, curated vulnerability. That performance of authenticity we talked about, the power source.
The guru-influencer economy. It runs on the currency of carefully packaged personal struggle and overcoming narratives.
And the mechanism. It's like the Catholic confessional.
That's the parallel drawn. You share your deepest shame, your unspeakable story within a designated controlled space, the therapy room, the workshop, the online group, the comments section.
And this reinforces the authority of the listener, the therapist, the guru, the influencer.
Absolutely. They validate your pain, which feels good. But their elevated status often depends on them being the one who has supposedly transcended that specific pain, maintaining the power imbalance. You confess, they absolve or guide, their authority grows.
Okay, and the final deception, the one that keeps the whole engine running indefinitely. Deception 6, the virtue of slowness, titration, power source.
The entire self-help and therapy industrial complex. The whole machine profits from ongoing maintenance, not from efficient cures.
So why glorify slow, nonlinear recovery as deep work?
Because it manufactures consent. Consent for long-term, continuous, costly dependency. It removes any expectation of a timely resolution.
Our sources compared it to Catholic purgatory.
Exactly. A necessary, lengthy, often painful, and certainly expensive period of suffering and purification you must endure before you can hope to reach the promised land distant liberation, the fully actualized self. The system is fundamentally designed for maintenance. It aims to reduce acute distress just enough to keep you hooked, keep you paying, but rarely, if ever, truly setting you free from the system itself.
Okay, so let's synthesize all this. The universal sickness, The fragmented self, the elusive internal cure needing external keys, the body as traitor, the monetized vulnerability, the virtue of slowness. What's the ultimate bottom line here?
The ultimate deception isn't necessarily that every single technique taught is useless. Some coping skills might offer temporary relief. The real deception is that the entire system requires your submission. Submission to its proprietary language, its categories of self, its specific map of suffering, in order to even access that relief.
So the synthesis is stark. The system doesn't liberate you. It ruthlessly colonizes your interior world.
Perfectly said. It replaces one set of societal norms and shames, maybe from your family, your culture, with its own set of expert-defined norms and shames.
Like now you feel shame for failing to access your capital S self,
Hmm.
or shame for having an uncooperative protector part.
Exactly. The individual gets transformed. You become a permanent subject of this system. Trained, conditioned to see yourself, your past, your future, exclusively through this trauma-colored lens. It ensures your perpetual status as a patient, someone needing constant management, optimization, and expert guidance.
So true liberation, the path out, it has to start with refusing this definition, refusing to be categorized this way.
That's the argument. Refusing to accept the diagnosis of the fragmented self, the universally traumatized self. This whole deep dive, this analysis, it's intended as a tool, a weapon against the system taking ownership of your own mind.
Because the mind is the final frontier of sovereignty.
It has to be. We're calling this the call to cognitive Armageddon. It sounds dramatic, but it's about rejecting the system's grip. Reject the universal diagnoses. Reject the mandatory fragmentation. Reject the shame cycles manufactured by the very industry promising to save you from them.
The first step towards genuine healing, or maybe just genuine living, might be recognizing the trap itself. Owning the complex, messy, maybe difficult, but not necessarily pathological reality of just being human.
And that's our deep dive for this week.
Remember, the most dangerous illusion is the one you don't know you're in.
But now you know. So here's our question for you. So we've torn apart the trauma healing industry. Now the real question is, what is the one idea you've held on to about your own mind, your past, or your brokenness that you're finally ready to put on the chopping block?
Let us know in the comments. Question the narrative. Deconstruct the dogma. See the system.
We'll see you next time. Stay skeptical.